Friends and family in arms, I'm the Stormy Poet and welcome to Poethnic Justice. I originally was going to entitle this edition of the Poethnic Justice Podcast as The Difference Between Radicals and Revolutionaries, but the more I thought about it, I saw even the title of revolutionary could be misconstrued and falsely perceived as fundamentally extreme or illogical. Furthermore, whenever words like radical and much less revolutionary get tossed about, the stereotypical image is some unruly anarchist heaving a Molotov cocktail through a store window, or some person delivering a fiery speech about how we need to take politicians hostage or overthrow the government by force typically come to mind for most people in America. Most people equate terms like revolutionary, rebellion, or freedom fighter with those seeking to cause widespread destruction or major disruptions to their day-to-day routines in life. And while most just revolutions throughout history that have been of any significance have been the cause of extreme social discomfort, such instances are normally brought about by the very ones suing for law and order and peace being outright ignored or being attacked unprovoked just for advocating so. As MLK so eloquently put it, quote, "And I must say tonight that a riot is the language of the unheard, and what is it America has failed to hear?" End quote. I've used such terms in the past myself. I've even gone as far as using them in the titles of my podcast, but I try to stick to using such terms seldom, being that I understand the unfairly attached connotations they come coupled with. That is why I chose the term rationals to provide contrast to radicals, because whenever it's time to formulate a substantive strategy that will fundamentally spell out what an actual fair and just society looks like, those putting in the work of making that concept a reality are demonized and labeled as kooks, conspiracy theorists, outliers, or even as traitors to America for doing so. There is absolutely nothing radical about things like truth, honesty, logic, and facts. Now, if you're looking to maintain a system based on lies, unfairness, and outright violence, then things like logic and facts are your mortal enemy. And of course, you'll have to slander and vilify those who advocate for such principles. This is why the FBI under Lyndon B. Johnson's Democratic administration labeled and targeted MLK as a communist, which at the time was another word for terrorist or radical. You had MLK, who never advocated for violence in his life and who, as a matter of fact, condemned it, even against those who were beating his brains out in the middle of the streets and locking them up, being labeled as someone seeking to, quote, overthrow the government by force. Needless to say, they didn't find any evidence to support this. What they did find, though, was that everything that he and the SCLC stood for and advocated for was in the name of democracy, the very political system this country has never, not for 1 minute of its existence, ever operated under. However, that didn't stop them from circulating the lie that they had audio and video recordings of Dr. King being a frequent adulterer and of him cheating on Coretta Scott with white women. Tapes they've still not declassified, by the way. Every now and then, even all these years later, you hear the FBI threaten to release these alleged tapes. The majority of America, including a significant number of black people, unfortunately, has always been against both the advocacy for and the acquisition of black people receiving specific tangibles that will elevate them socioeconomically as a collective. A piece done by Time magazine quotes a poll done by the New York Times a year after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, saying, quote, "Nationally, white people's support of the civil rights movement continued to be low throughout the 1960s. In 1966, a year after Selma and the passage of the Voting Rights Act, only 36% of white people said King was helping the cause. 85% of white people surveyed said the demonstrations by Negroes on civil rights hurt the advancement of the cause, while 30% of black respondents felt the same. 72% of Americans had an unfavorable view of King. While many people of all races admired King and Parks in the 1960s, the majority of Americans did not and found the civil rights movement both wrong and unnecessary," end quote. A 2021 Pew Research Center survey found that 3 in 10 U.S. adults say descendants of people enslaved in the U.S. should be repaid in some way, such as given land or money. But that about 7 in 10, 68%, say these descendants should not be repaid. Those numbers just go to show that public sentiment has changed very little when it comes to black people getting what's owed to them. Both Malcolm as well as the Nation of Islam are still being labeled as black supremacists and anti-white racists. Meanwhile, never once did you see Malcolm ever advocating for, nor have you ever seen the members of the nation rounding up scores of white men, women, and children to lynch them. Nor did you ever see them bombing or burning down white churches with little girls inside. There is zero Nation of Islam or MMI equivalent to the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. As a matter of fact, it was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad that actually punished Malcolm for his infamous chickens coming home to roost comments he made in regards to Kennedy's assassination. Alhaj Malik El-Shabazz was a master orator and had no trouble going in front of crowds of mouth-frothing racists and stating both his viewpoints and that of his organizations clearly, concisely, and decisively. Not once did he ever express a hatred of white people or a want to bring harm to them, nor did he ever mention overthrowing the government. Though you've had many white militia groups throughout this country's history who have expressed anti-black sentiments and who have made attempts to overthrow the government. Shouts out to Clive and Bundy and the Confederacy, by the way. As a matter of fact, what he did call for was the separation and sovereignty away from white society, for black people to have their own communities away from the very people who didn't want them in theirs. The very opposite of seeking to overthrow a government is by advocating having your own nation and society away from and outside of that very government. The thing that earned him the title of being, quote, a black supremacist and of being a spokesperson of a hate group was for the very simple fact that he was advocating for black people to become non-reliant on the white power structure, and that while he did not preach violence, he unapologetically advocated for black people defending themselves by any means necessary. But of course, what good does it do to have a system based on race when you don't have the group classified as black depending on you for every crumb of their daily bread, or when you can abuse them at will with absolutely zero opposition? So the same white powers that be who sent the FBI after Dr. King also sent them after Malcolm in the same fashion to infiltrate Muslim Musk Inc. to muddy his image, also like they did Dr. King. Only this time, instead of them just circulating falsehoods about Malcolm being an unfaithful husband, they took it another step further by claiming he was having affairs with both men and women, that he was a closeted bisexual. Yeah, I'm sure during the times he wasn't having his phone tapped, when he wasn't receiving death threats to his family, and when he wasn't having his home firebombed, Malcolm was moonlighting under the cover of night in his spare time. Please. By the way, despite the narrative being passed down by the white establishment throughout the years that Martin and Malcolm were just these hardcore polar opposites, with Martin being just this complete pacifist and with Malcolm being some kind of anti-white violent warmonger, just know they were both, indeed, far more ideologically aligned than not when it came to what was in black people's best interests, even more so towards the end of their lives. Right there is a great example of black people not needing to agree on every single little thing in order to identify who the enemy is and to identify what is the most effective method of fighting that enemy. It was for this very reason that they were murdered, simply for upholding the very ideals this country is supposed to be allegedly founded upon. I repeat, am not a radical in any sense of the word, and neither are the black men and women who speak this kind of truth to power, and we're not any kind of equivalent that both those on the right and the left try to pin on us, whether that means being called woke or reverse racist by the conservatives or Hotep and Russian bots from the liberals. Another brief aside, there's a book that came out in May of this year entitled King, A Life, written by Jonathan Eig, a white man, which further dispels the myths that King was an adulterer and that he was diametrically opposed to Malcolm's strategy of black liberation, and vice versa, despite what your school teachers and college professors taught you about them. Now, the black people in our circles have been condemning those kinds of myths about our icons for years, and as I've said before, there are just some things that both white and non-white people won't believe until a white man says it. I remember someone actually arguing with me in one of my comment sections a few years back that Dr. King was a womanizer and a misogynist. I'm not making that up. I wonder what she'd think now that this white man is coming out and saying what we've been saying all along. I hope she's watching. An NPR interview with the author about this book is linked in the description if she is. We're not extremist militants despite the political establishment's campaign to paint us as such. We're not socialists, we're not communists, we're not Democrats, Republicans, or any major political party. We're not even bitter, even though we'd have the right to be considering what we've survived and have still managed to thrive under these past few centuries. We're not trying to overthrow the government, so don't lump us in with the January 6th crowd. We are not conspiracy theorists, so don't lump us in with the Alex Jones crowd either. The black men and women who speak how I speak and who speak what I speak about are simply truth sayers, nothing more, nothing less. We're simply reporting the state and true nature of this nation and the reality of our twisted relationship with it as black people. Systemic racism, much like the force of gravity, influences every way in which we live our lives, so much so that we're not even aware of its existence. All we're doing is simply reminding the public that this system indeed exists, that it is not a naturally occurring phenomenon, that the white privilege it produces is detrimental to the planet as a whole, and that there is a far more effective, efficient, and just way to run a society. one that produces far more prosperity for everyone than there already is. The fact is, though, most people don't want to have to face up to that reality because they know that if they do, they'll have to actually do something about it. It's an inconvenient truth, and the powers that be know that this is the societal subconscious consensus. Heck, they use their media structure to mold and shape it to begin with. And so they give the public buzzwords and stereotypes to pin on any black person who dares speak out about how this country really does its business. That way they can just simply write them off as kooks or people who just take things too seriously. And then they can go back to living their lives and rationalizing their escapism and inaction. I'm a writer, folks. The art of expression, the written and spoken word, has always fascinated me, and I've always had a knack for it as long as I can remember. And those of you who follow my various platforms know that I do a variety of literary artwork well outside of this kind of commentary. But I think that the maker imparts with us certain gifts and talents, not just to impress or entertain people or make money off of them. I believe my ability for composition came with an inherent duty, a duty to convey and distribute as much constructive information as effectively possible. All that to say, most of us who speak on these things would much rather be doing something else with our talents and abilities. Many of us who are poets, musicians, painters, sculptors, photographers, or even those who have particular passions would much rather be spending our time focused on using our creativity on those things rather than calling out this system. This system that's destroyed countless lives based on the silliness of damn skin color. That is who we are. We're the real Americans. We care about justice, freedom, liberty, and things like righteousness, so much so that we take time out of our lives daily when we could be literally doing anything else with our time and talents to advocate for these principles. There's nothing terroristic or hotep about that. That's just called being civilized, decent, and upstanding human beings. That's not being radical or militant, folks, and neither is calling out white supremacy. That's just called being rational and accepting of reality. There's absolutely no way in the world that black people are literally at the bottom of every societal metric in America and in the world without that dynamic being intentionally engineered and vigorously maintained. That's just called doing math, and simply doing math is not, quote, being militant. We do not hate white people in any way, nor do we have a desire to see white people harmed or mistreated in any way, which is a true testament to our humanity as a people, being all that we've gone through and are still going through. That said, we recognize that we've been humane to a fault throughout history, and we're just the ones saying that we're putting a stop to that. We're the ones saying the exact same thing white people have always made very clear, that we have a God-given right to protect ourselves by any means necessary, and that includes protecting ourselves physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, to anyone in the white establishment who still claims we're, quote, radical or militant is simply vilifying themselves at this point because we're simply adopting their very own philosophies about self-defense. Those who ignore and demonize black men and women, those who are brave enough to stand up against what the whole damn planet should be standing up against, are just cowards. Full stop. Whether it's the white media execs and the program directors who manufacture these false narratives, the white politicians who parrot that rhetoric and enact laws based on it, or the black people who've simply accepted defeat and aren't willing to speak up, they're all cowards. And they're cowards because they're scared. They're scared because we've moved to a space mentally where we're in a perpetual state of problem solving and solution-based thinking in regards to eradicating this wicked system from existence. And they don't want that catching on with others and becoming habit forming. They're scared because once black people focus their minds on something, whether it be the pyramids or the Black Wall Streets, they'll find a way to get it done, or they'll forge a way if there isn't one. They're very scared. And you know what? They should be indeed. While the truth is simply the truth, and while there's nothing radical or extreme for speaking it, that's not to say that the change that comes from it, for the better, won't be. And that scares the living daylights out of them. One love and one justice. TSP.